Harvey's devastation grows.
I'm Wyatt Goolsby reporting in Spring, Texas, where the floodwaters are starting to recede, but not without leaving extensive damage. We'll take you inside St. Ignatius of Loyola Catholic Church and show you the devastation left behind.
Continuing to serve, Defense Secretary Jim Mattis made his decision about transgender service. China church demolition. Catholics block crews from tearing down their place of worship. Plus, a dream come true. Former White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer meets the Holy Father. We have the pictures. On EWTN News Nightly for Wednesday, August 30th, 2017. Dramatic video out of Texas as members of the New York National Guard rescue a 1-month-old baby from flooding. President Donald Trump is promising billions to help Texas rebuild from Hurricane Harvey. Thank you for joining us for News from a Catholic Perspective. I'm Lauren Ashburn. The president says he's returning to Texas Saturday to visit areas affected by the hurricane. Epic flooding continues, and no one knows how much higher the waters will rise. A humanitarian crisis unfolding in the metropolitan Houston area. Evacuations continue as water rises, and an already deadly and devastating Harvey makes a second U.S. landfall in southwest Louisiana.
When we was out there on that roof Sunday and Monday, that water was coming in so fast. And then we got rescued on that bridge, and they tell us that bridge has collapsed since. So I know it's nothing but God.
Tens of thousands in shelters amid catastrophic flooding brought by record rainfall. Many more still waiting to be rescued as emergency crews and volunteers race against time to reach those still trapped in their homes.
Eat something and just dry up a little bit, get a little bit of energy, a little bit of coffee in our system, and we're back out.
Harvey has soaked some areas around Houston with more than 50 inches of rain.
They didn't expect this much water to fall. This is Houston. We're used to weather like this, but I believe this is a little more than we expected.
At least 20 people have died. And some Catholics across the Lone Star State are thanking God for a break in rain. It's giving churches a chance to survey extensive damage left after this hurricane. Correspondent Wyatt Goolsby, a Houston native, is going to join us from Spring, Texas, just north of Houston, where the flooding filled an entire church, leaving a parish community without a home. Wyatt, tell us what's happening. Good evening.
Good evening, Lord. It will take many years before churches are able to fully recover after this hurricane. That includes St. Ignatius of Loyola Catholic Church here, where it has been, until this afternoon, completely inaccessible. In fact, this parking lot, the water was so high, it went up to my chest. A parish church reachable only by boat.
Oh, there it is. Wow. Look at this.
This water, it's all pouring out. Just trying to open the back door of St. Ignatius of Loyola Catholic Church proved to be a challenge. Dirty, smelly bayou water fills this church, from the offices to the music room, even the sanctuary itself.
This, for me, is my first true disaster to deal with after living in Houston over 60 years.
Father Norbert Meduja, 11-year pastor of this church, which serves over 4,000 parish families, picking up the pieces, finding hope in destruction.
But it just reminded me that our Lord is suffering with everyone. That to see him floating face down with the corpus broken and the arm missing family members, everybody that's suffering this loss, and he's right there in the middle of us all.
But as heartbreaking as it is to walk amidst the wreckage, the tabernacle containing Holy Communion survived intact. Father Norbert carried the Blessed Sacrament to safety, grateful for this small miracle. While for now the parish is without a physical home, Father Norbert comforts his flock.
We are the church. You are the church. It's us together, laity, priests, deacons, bishops, cardinals, pope. It's all of us together.
Now, Father Norbert tells me since his church flooded, a number of other churches, Catholic and Protestant, have reached out and offered their facilities so that he can hold Mass and celebrate Mass with his parishioners. He's considering right now a nearby high school just across the street from the church. In the meantime, this whole area has been actively hit by the hurricane, and as a result, Catholic parishes in the area have been collecting and distributing essential items like food and clothes. St. Anthony of Padua Catholic Church in the Woodlands is just one example. Many of the parishioners there and around this area, kids and adults, have been volunteering their time and efforts. Lauren?
Wyatt, I understand you and cameraman Paul Fifield could not find a place to sleep last night. What happened?
That's right, Lauren. A number of the hotels in and around the greater Houston area are full tonight, and obviously last night a number of restaurants were also closed, so it was hard for us to even find a place to stop and stay. But luckily, we mentioned St. Anthony of Padua. Luckily, the pastor there had offered us a place to stay for the night and has been very welcoming to us and to our EWTN crew. Lauren?
How lucky are you? You were able to stay in a rectory, and they're the ones undergoing that flooding, and they're reaching out to you. It's just a wonderful story, and I hope you and Paul stay safe, and we will look forward to your report tomorrow as you head home to try to take a look at the damage. Correspondent Wyatt Goolsby reporting from Spring, Texas. Thank you, Wyatt. U.S. bishops respond to the natural disaster with a plea for your help tonight. Jason Calvi is here. He tells us how bishops are encouraging parishioners around the country to join together to help hurricane victims. Good evening, Jason.
Good evening, Lauren. America's largest Catholic church behind me is just one of the places taking up a special collection this Sunday. D.C.'s National Shrine of the Immaculate Conception and parishes across the country will be helping hurricane victims rebuild their lives.
There are many, many people right now who are suffering here in Houston, and they need help and they need donations.
Joe McLean speaks out for his neighbors in need.
We have a Catholic homeschooling family in our group. They lost everything in that, and right now we're trying to get them cars and food and clothing and whatever else they need.
Good Samaritans helped Joe and his family escape when the floodwaters reached their front door.
The people who saved my family, they were from Tennessee. You know, they just got in their truck, brought their boat down, and they're just going through and trying to save people. So to me, that's where my mind is right now. It's just in thinking of how can we help?
You don't need a boat to help. The U.S. Bishops' Conference asks the nation's parishes to pass the plate for the victims of Hurricane Harvey. Jonathan Reyes leads the Bishop's Department of Justice, Peace, and Human Development.
This is an opportunity for us to really step in and love our neighbor. And, you know, Catholics do this. We do this well. We've done this in the past. For you name the hurricane, we've been there. And Catholics have stepped up and given millions of dollars. And so this is just, I think, Catholics showing the world what we're about.
The money goes to the diocese and Catholic charities in the ravaged areas. But even if you can't give, the U.S. bishops ask for your prayers.
This is a spiritual disaster as well as a natural disaster. And so I just want to echo what His Eminence Cardinal DiNardo said, and it's time to pray. We need to wake up Jesus in the boat.
Some of the largest archdioceses in the country are accepting this challenge to help the flood victims. Cardinal Timothy Dolan in New York is encouraging his parishes to take up the collection either this weekend or next. And in Chicago, they're going to be taking this collection up on the weekend of the 9th and the 10th. Lauren?
Jason, if you're watching right now, how can Catholics help right now, right away?
Right away, you can go to the website of CatholicCharitiesUSA.org, and right at the top of that page, you'll see a link. Follow that link, and you can make your donation right away.
Fabulous story. My heart just went out to that man standing there, and just so grateful for all the people, his relatives who came to help him. Correspondent Jason Calvi in Washington. Thank you, Jason. We will have continuing coverage, including reports from Wyatt Goolsby in Texas for the rest of the week. And coming up later in the show, we'll break down the president's trip to Texas and tell how he is dealing with this disaster. President Trump is now traveling to the Midwest to begin lobbying for what he calls a long overdue tax overhaul. Speaking at a Missouri company that manufactures exhaust systems, he promises to support the largest tax cut ever to help small business owners and the middle class. Correspondent Mark Irons reports from the White House. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, Lauren. The president visits the birthplace of the historic Route 66 highway known as America's Main Street. The challenge for the president is not selling this tax plan to the people. It's working with a Congress that faces an intense September workload.
President Trump hits the heartland hoping to gin up support for his tax reform vision.
Our self-destructive tax code cost Americans millions and millions of jobs, trillions of dollars, and billions of hours spent on compliance and paperwork.
Stephen Moore worked on the Trump campaign and now advises the administration on reforming a tax code that hasn't been changed since 1986.
The centerpiece of which is cutting business taxes so we have a more competitive business tax code because we're losing too many factories and jobs.
On the campaign trail, the president promised to cut them to 15% and bring relief to individuals. The White House put out a memo in April calling for reducing 7 tax brackets to 4, doubling the standard deduction and providing relief for families with child and dependent care expense. But even Moore says simplifying the 4 million word code is going to be daunting after losing the health care reform battle. Congress will be swamped this September, forming a Hurricane Harvey relief package and finding ways to use government funds without causing government shutdown. A lack of support from Democrats may keep Trump's tax dream from becoming a reality. Today's Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer says if the plan provides huge cuts for the wealthy while leaving crumbs for the middle class, the American people will rise up against it.
White House officials say more details of the president's tax plan will come later, and it is up to Congress to craft this bill. Now, Gary Cohn, the director of the National Economic Council, says a bill could pass the House and Senate by year's end.
Mark, after losing on health care, the president is clearly going to have to work with Congress to get this done. And what is he saying about that?
The president said today he does not want to be disappointed by Congress and that he is committed to working with them on tax reform. He also said at today's rally, "I think Congress is going to make a comeback."
Okay. Correspondent Mark Irons at the White House. On the heels of North Korea's recent missile test over Japan, President Trump takes a swipe at previous administrations' foreign policy. The president tweeted, "The U.S. has been talking to North Korea and paying them extortion money for 25 years. Talking is not the answer." Now, the tweet did not spell out what he meant by extortion. The White House did not immediately respond to questions. And earlier today, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un called for more launches to advance his country's ability to contain Guam, home to key U.S. military bases. Transgender service members will be allowed to serve in the military pending the results of a new study. Defense Secretary Jim Mattis made the announcement yesterday, saying until a panel recommends how to carry out President Trump's ban, current members will stay in the military, and the study is expected to take 6 months. More than 1,000 people have died in flooding across South Asia this summer. That's according to the United Nations. It says 41 million people have been impacted in Bangladesh, India, and Nepal. And officials say while Houston is grabbing more attention, a catastrophe is unfolding in Asia. A new UN report says human rights violations are worsening in Venezuela. A team of investigators reviewed deaths linked to anti-government protests. It found many deaths are being carried out by pro-government groups, and investigators warn there is a grave risk that this situation will only get worse. Dozens of Catholics come forward to stop the demolition of their church in the southeast China province of Chiangzai. Asia News reports the Chinese government wants the church destroyed so the area there can enrich the life of the people. They will build a square. Shouting, "Jesus, save me," and "Mother Mary, have pity on us," the church's priests and parishioners gathered in the rain to pray and block those crews. They number more than 50,000 in that province and are served by 47 priests. Authorities did stop in an attempt to solve the situation. 3 years after ISIS moved in, Christians are cautiously returning to Mosul. This is video from the Institute of the Incarnate Word. A priest celebrating Mass earlier this month at St. George Monastery. The priest said coming back was a great gift of God. And you can read more about the Mass and the return of Christians at CatholicNewsAgency.com. Coming up.
This was of epic proportion.
how the president is handling the first natural disaster of his administration. Plus, the Pope's appeal, a report from Rome ahead of the day for prayer for the environment. As we've reported, President Trump is heading back to Texas Saturday to survey flood damage. So just how is the Trump administration handling response to Hurricane Harvey? We're joined by Vince Colonnese, editorial director of the Daily Caller. He's going to weigh in on the president's handling of this natural disaster. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
In your opinion, how has President Trump handled his first natural disaster?
Well, it's clear he's certainly putting all of his attention on it. I mean, if we judge the president in terms of how he's thinking at any given moment, we can look at his Twitter account usually, and I think the volume of tweets just on this alone, while, you know, it's kind of a silly way to measure the president's intent, but it works in this case. When you look at President Trump, he spent all of his time on this. He spent the entire weekend talking about it. He moved to declare an emergency pretty quickly. And he, I think, measured sort of how difficult it would be to get a president of the United States into the area, and also kind of took that into consideration.
And by landing in Corpus Christi as opposed to landing in Houston
absolutely.
Yesterday. And there's currently about $3 billion left in the FEMA Disaster Relief Fund for 2017 expenses. Is this going to be enough for recovery efforts, and is the president going to be able to keep his promise to make sure that enough aid is getting to Texas and now Louisiana?
He's promised to sprint a lot of aid in, and I don't think he's going to meet much resistance. Democrats clearly want this. You have people like Sheila Jackson Lee in Texas who's already pushing hard for this. Republicans seem to be kind of uniform in wanting to provide aid. So convincing Congress is not going to be a tall task. We're talking a lot of money. $3 billion for a disaster like this is nothing. You look at things like Katrina and Sandy, we're talking $50, $100 billion in each of those cases. So we're going to be looking at a big price tag on taking care of Texas and Louisiana here.
Today, the president is leaving behind the hurricane. He's moving to tax reform, a kickoff event at a small manufacturing company in Springfield, Missouri. Will the natural disaster and all of the energy and time that he is going to have to spend on that affect his next big legislative hurdle, which is tax reform?
Well, it would seem to me as an electoral matter that it's actually helpful for the Republican Party if they can kind of coalesce around some concept on tax reform. So far we've seen the major legislative hiccups over and over, although the president has gotten a lot of Congressional Review Acts passed, which basically take down regulations. On this thing specifically, tax reform, you kind of expect that if they do this in any traditional sense, they're going to bring a lot to the table and then maybe give on some things, maybe tax cuts for the rich, et cetera, in order to get something accomplished here. I think they can do it. And maybe, just maybe this hurricane, if it delivers anything good to Washington, maybe some unity and a little bit more of like just cooling down of tensions as these congressmen deal with these.
Pie in the sky.
Here's hoping.
We'll see. That's right. All right. Thank you so much, Vince Colonnese, editorial director of the Daily Caller.
Lauren, thank you.
Pope Francis is urging world leaders to listen to the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor.
Facciamo inoltre appello a quanti occupano ruoli influenti.
The Holy Father made the comments during his weekly general audience at the Vatican, where he focused on Christian hope. Edward Penton, Rome correspondent for EWTN's National Catholic Register, joins us. Tell us why Pope Francis made this special appeal for the care of creation. What do you think he's trying to emphasize?
He's emphasizing, Lauren, he says we need to listen to the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor, especially though in those areas where he says they're in danger of the ecological imbalance. And he's saying that to world leaders especially, they must be respectful and responsible towards creation. And he says this because the day after tomorrow it's the World Day of Prayer for the Care of Creation, something that he set up a few years ago.
Yeah, how did it come about? He was the one who made it happen?
That's right. He teamed up with Patriarch Bartholomew, the ecumenical patriarch, the Orthodox patriarch, to set up this day 3 years ago. It's now the third one, and it was really set up to remind people of their vocation, as he calls it, to safeguard creation and to just reinforce that idea. Patriarch Bartholomew has pushed this idea for a long time. Since 1989 he's had this year, and now the Catholic Church has joined him through Pope Francis back in 2015.
In his remarks today, the Holy Father spoke about the relationship between hope and memory. I find that fascinating. What was he saying exactly?
he was talking about vocation, and he was also trying to get us to recall our first encounter with Christ, because he says the first encounter of Christ is a time that we remember because it's when our hearts were inflamed and we have that great memory, that zeal for Christ, as the apostles did when they first encountered Christ. And he's saying we have to recall that and remember it so that we can work out our own vocation. So that was the meaning of his catechesis today.
That's fascinating. Thank you so much for joining us, Edward Penton, Rome correspondent for EWTN's National Catholic Register.
Thanks, Lauren.
Also at today's audience, the Holy Father met survivors of an airplane crash that killed most of a Brazilian soccer team. The Holy Father posed for pictures and gave the players a special welcome. All but 6 of the 77 died in November when the plane crashed in Colombia. Up next, the practice of female genital mutilation. We'll talk about the issue with Christina Arriaga. Plus, wishes do come true for Sean Spicer, former press secretary to the president. Here's a look at just a few of the Catholic organizations raising money to help those recover from Hurricane Harvey. You can send donations to Catholic Relief Services, Catholic Charities, and the Knights of Columbus. We reported earlier that you can also help by donating money to your local parish. Female genital mutilation is still a common problem, not just around the world, but here in the U.S. In 1996, Congress made it illegal, yet only 25 states have laws that criminalize the procedure. Detroit area doctor Jumana Nagarwala has been charged with performing genital mutilation on 2 7-year-old girls earlier this year. So has Dr. Fakhruddin Attar, the owner of a now-closed clinic. She insists that she conducted a benign religious ritual for a family of a Muslim sect. The trial date is set for October, where both doctors could face life in prison. Joining us now is Christina Arriaga, a longtime religious freedom advocate. Now she's involved at a new initiative at Pepperdine University. I understand that there are about 200 million girls and women alive who have been subjected to genital mutilation. And of those girls, only 20% of their parents take them to doctors. Why is this barbaric practice allowed?
That's right. And here in this country, we have 500,000 girls at risk from undergoing the same procedure. It is illegal in many countries. It has been illegal in this country since 1996. And yet in the United States, we have only had one case go to court. And that happened this year. The trial is going to be in October.
So this is the case of the Detroit doctors, one of whom may be involved in 100 cases, it's expected. The defense lawyers are going to build a religious freedom case, arguing that doctors didn't perform the cutting, but rather a religious ritual.
This is extraordinarily disturbing. There's not a single religious text in the world that calls for female genital mutilation, and yet the attorneys for this physician who are none other than O.J. Simpson's attorney, Alan Dershowitz, and the attorneys for Jack Kevorkian, they're very PR savvy, and they're going to say this is a religious and cultural practice. And this is a dangerous hypocrisy with repercussions for every American.
Here's what you wrote in an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal. Part of what you said: doing what is right may also yield an important social good, the restoration of religious freedom to its proper place in American culture and jurisprudence. What did you mean?
Americans cannot allow religious freedom to be a code for something else. It cannot be a code for discrimination. It certainly cannot be a code to justify harming young girls. When these girls deserve our protection, but also we as Americans must always abide by the principle that religious freedom is a bedrock right that is important to all Americans.
And so what do you want to happen?
I want to raise awareness of this issue. This op-ed piece that I wrote for the Wall Street Journal has gone viral. It has reached over 300,000 people in the United States alone, plus the 1.1 million circulation in the Wall Street Journal. People don't know that it's happening in their neighborhoods. Every single state, except Hawaii, have girls that undergo this procedure. We have to stand up for these girls, and we have to stand up for the fact that religious freedom does not allow harming these girls.
Beautifully said, Christina Arriaga. Thank you so much, Vice Chair for the United States Commission on International Religious Freedom.
Thank you, Lauren.
It was a dream come true. Former White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer finally met Pope Francis. On Ash Wednesday this year, he told me about the importance of the Holy Father.
Beyond obviously the spiritual and the religious aspect of it, the Holy Father is a major guiding force in the world.
He attended an audience with Pope Francis Sunday as part of an annual meeting with international legislators. Spicer is Catholic, but he was left off the list of officials who met with the Pope when President Trump visited the Vatican in May. For all of us here at EWTN News Nightly, to all of you around the world, thank you for watching. I'm Lauren Ashburn. We'll be back tomorrow with more news from a Catholic perspective. Good night, and God bless you.